Cultural
I
intelligence is so important. And as we become a more and more global society, it becomes less forgivable when we won't think that way. And so,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, there's tremendous numbers of examples when we've done it wrong as far as different organizations. And what I am hoping is that we will be more cognizant about cultural intelligence and understand that we need people who understand each culture at the table when decisions are being made.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the Leadership Podcast. I am so excited here today to introduce you all to Nina Fleming, who is such an amazing DEI executive. Welcome, Nina, to the show.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, we are too. Tell us a little bit about yourself for those of us who don't know about you.
So, I am an expert in the field of DEI. It is truly where my passion, my purpose, and my profession align. And I am also the owner of Inclusive Ideas. And I love helping companies transform their culture. I love the benefits that it brings to the organization as well as to the employees and to their customers.
And you've been doing this for quite some time. If I look at your LinkedIn, I feel like many, many, many years of DEI work.
Absolutely. And like a lot of DEI professionals, I started because I was so passionate about it and I wanted to see those changes, even when it wasn't a part of my major area of responsibility. I was doing the work. And so I've been doing this for probably about 15 years.
Yeah, that's amazing. I feel like it's always you're always doing the work.
Yes,
And it can
you
get
are.
so exhausting. So thank you for all the energy you put into it.
I celebrate the wins for a long time. And
Hmm.
one of the quotes by Nelson Mandela I have taped to my window where it says, "I never lose. I either win or I lose. I learn." And with DEI, you have to learn a lot of lessons in between your wins, but your wins are a victory not just for you personally, but for the organization and for the people that you represent.
I love that. I love that. So you've been able to see DEI's impact across organizations, employees, even customers. Can you share some success stories where DEI initiatives have, you've seen transform a workplace, or just talk a little bit about the ripple effect it might have on employee morale or customer experience, whichever way you want to go.
Sure, there's tremendous opportunities in each direction. One of the aspects that I can speak to is at Sovos as the global DEI vice president. When I started with the organization, our score on Glassdoor for both culture and for DEI was not great at all. And we doubled that score on Glassdoor. And as you understand with Glassdoor, those are the most authentic conversations and rankings you can get because they're anonymous. You don't know who gave them to you. It can be current employees or former employees. And so for our score to increase by that amount, it meant that customers and it meant that our employees really felt the difference. And that was tremendously valuable to me. In addition to that, it was also valuable to me the number of times where an employee would actually take the time to communicate that they felt seen because of one of our initiatives. They felt seen because we taught the organization that diversity is not just race and gender, which is what a lot of people think about. The neurodiverse people and other aspects of diversity fit into that. Whether you're a parent working in the world today or you're a single person, all of that comprises the diversity and the demographics that make us different and make our views different and our lived experience valuable.
That's amazing. I quickly got out of corporate very early on in my career. So I'm so curious to um, hear about what were some of the things that really made that impact. You hear about it. I feel like a lot of times with DEI, there's a lot of talking, talking, talking. But what are the actual actionable things that happen that you feel like really increase those scores?
One thing, well, there were a lot. One, I believe that when an organization actually invests to have people in charge of DEI and those people report at the very top level, it signals that they're very serious about it. And we did that. I had the pleasure of being the inaugural DEI leader for Silvos, and it's a global company, and so it was a true statement to report to the CEO and to be a part of the leadership team. You're sitting in the room where decisions are made, and you have the opportunity to have an impact on those decisions. And in my dream state for all organizations, DEI really needs to be in the room when decisions are being made, not being informed after those decisions are being made. Because when we want to discuss equitable policies, doing that after the fact is twice as much work for half the value. If we can have those discussions and we can really give employees the opportunity to have a voice when decisions are being made and truly be included, we can really make much better strides without the lack of efficiency when we need to go back and correct what we didn't do.
I love that. That is amazing. Yes, I think, it's interesting because I did say, hey, there's usually a lot of talk and, you just kind of see it, but you don't actually see something actionable. But what you're saying is just the act of leadership saying, hey, we care, and giving people a seat at the table really just makes a huge, huge difference on culture.
It did. And in addition to that, there was also a intentional part of educating our staff and our leadership about the aspects of what it means to be serious about DEI. And one of the aspects about it is psychological safety is the fundamental part of it. If people don't feel safe, they're never going to feel included. And what I believe a lot of companies think is that if you just simply have diversity in your organization, then you've done DEI. And it's not that way. You have to start to look at the distribution of power. Who has the ability to speak in the room? Have we made it safe for people to disagree respectfully, but to disagree with what may be happening? And you can see that in certain companies, and you can see when it doesn't happen. Some of the advertisements with some of the large publicly held companies, diversity was not being represented with people being included in the room for the commercial to be that offensive to certain groups. And so these are the aspects of what it looks like when diversity and inclusion and equity aren't happening. We can see those very public hiccups, and it costs companies money and it costs them customers. And it's very it's the right thing to do, not just simply because it makes your employees feel better. It's the way that you develop talent. It's the way that you make sure that you're representing your customers and you are speaking to your customers authentically, because we've all seen advertisements geared towards folks that aren't authentic at all. And it shouldn't be that way. We can speak to our clients, we can speak to our employees, and we can do that in a way so that we're gaining business, but we're also helping people to appreciate that we are a company walking the walk and talking the talk.
That's so interesting that you say that because I look at different companies. You've seen the stories about let's say American companies going into the Japanese market, let's say, and all the snafus because they didn't consult people and they offended something related to the Japanese culture. But I think as we move to a more global workplace and you have so many different types of people, this idea again that you need to be more inclusive in your culture and you need to look at that, hey, American company going into Japan mistake as, what, that's on a day-to-day basis as well.
Absolutely. Cultural
I
intelligence is so important. And as we become a more and more global society, it becomes less forgivable when we won't think that way. And so,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, there's tremendous numbers of examples when we've done it wrong as far as different organizations. And what I am hoping is that we will be more cognizant about cultural intelligence and understand that we need people who understand each culture at the table when decisions are being made. We can't just have a homogeneous group making decisions for everyone and expect that it's going to be accepted and appreciated that way.
I love that. And it takes people like you as well. I've always said, hey, it's really important for people who don't feel comfortable, let's say, in whatever situation, to try to make themselves comfortable being uncomfortable, because it's the inclusivity and the willingness for people that don't look alike to be sitting at that table and to be
Absolutely.
willing to be uncomfortable in that situation.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
So, what would you say if you look at different company leaders who may not truly understand this? What are some of the hidden strengths that DEI can bring to a company that leaders might be overlooking? And how do these strengths create, more resilient and innovative organizations?
So, one thing that is important for leaders to understand is when you have an inclusive organization and you have given the power of communication to your employees, it may take you a little longer to reach a decision, but when you do reach that decision, it's going to be a better decision. And a couple of the benefits: you will retain your employees better if you have given this a serious intentional focus, and you not only have diversity as a silo, it needs to be integrated into your business. This is the way that you do things, right? Because if it's treated as this is an afterthought and yes, we got a check mark, then you're not going to see these benefits. But if you truly have given the person who leads your DEI a seat at the table, they're part of the team, they're able to speak up when these decisions are being made, and your leadership is responsible and accountable for integrating this into the business, you are going to see better talent at your organization because you're going to be able to attract it and you're going to be able to retain it. You're going to have succession plans that also include diverse leaders. And you are not sacrificing because you are including diversity. Talent is equally distributed, opportunity is not. And so when you take that time to really realize that people overall come to you from all shapes and sizes, all ethnicities, all genders, and they have the skills that you need, and you give them the opportunity, you remove the barriers, and you allow them to truly work and be their authentic selves, then you will see those benefits. And because we bring different lived experiences and we look at life differently and we bring that to work, we can actually achieve more innovation because there are ideas that I would have based on my lived experience that would be different than yours, that would be different from someone else's. And all of those ideas and all of those lived experiences are valuable when we start to talk about how we move forward, because no one person has all the answers, and no one gender, no one ethnicity, no one race, no one sexual preference or any of those things, no one aspect is the only one that matters. The more that we can include people at the table who may think differently, the better decisions we'll make. We need people who can actually provide different thoughts on, hey, have we thought about it this way? Because the way that I'm looking at it may be differently, but here's what I see. And when people are comfortable to do that and we actually listen, we'll get better solutions.
And what you're talking about when you talk about decisions take a little bit longer when you do this, you're talking about the initial integration. If you're
Absolutely.
really, but, and because, generally speaking, right, whether it's a DEI initiative or whether it's not, it's this idea that people take a second to work together. So
Mm-hmm.
as you're incorporating more inclusivity, more DEI into your workplace, it might take a second for you all to gel, but then once things gel, then it'll move faster. So,
Absolutely. And to use a small sports analogy here,
mhm,
when you have a basketball team and you change some of your major players, people know that it may take some time for them to start winning the way that you expect them to, because they've
mhm,
got to learn to play as a team.
mhm,
And they can be a championship team. You make those trades for a right reason. And when you build a team, it takes a minute for them to be cohesive, but once you build it and you give people the opportunity,
mhm,
then you can absolutely realize those benefits. And one other aspect that I just wanted to mention is that some of the younger generations, the millennials and Generation Z, expect that companies are going to value diversity. And
mhm.
when they see that that's not happening, then they're more apt to leave. And we just lived through the great resignation. And right now, companies are in the driver's seat because there are more people looking for employment than there are necessarily jobs out there in certain fields. But that's a pendulum swing, right? And it's
Mhm.
going to swing back. And so people are going to remember the decisions that companies make. And when there are more opportunities out there, they're going to exercise those.
Yes. I'm looking forward to that pendulum swinging back sooner than later. You talk about this idea of DI, right, being fully integrated into an organization's DNA. What does that ideal workplace look like? Like, what does it feel like for employees and for leaders?
It feels visible,
Mm-hmm.
and it also, there are tangible results, and there are also uh, really strategic plans that incorporate that. And when I say it feels visible, when a company is truly diverse and they appreciate diversity and inclusion and equitable procedures, then you can look at the leadership, and the leadership doesn't all look the same. And that may mean your C suite, that may mean the layers under your C suite are all inclusive of that. And if it is true that you believe it, then you're also appointing leaders that value diversity, and you are integrating that into your company. Your policies are going to shift. It won't be the same policies of 10 years ago. You're going to be inclusive. You're going to be able to allow people who are neurodiverse to work in ways that may not be the same as neurotypical people work. It's going to be, how can we best help you to be successful at our company? And so you'll see flexibility. It
Mm-hmm.
won't be a rigid work thing, whereas everyone has to report and it's 8 to 5 and we sit in our cubes all day. That's the work way of the past. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying that you can't be working from an office. I am saying that there are different ways that people are successful. And
Mm-hmm.
we're showing and we're demonstrating the flexibility. That's inclusion. We are allowing people to be able to work in a way so that they can demonstrate the best value to the company. Our policies are such that we are inclusive of the fact that people have different needs. Our insurance is different. We are showing up and we're helping people to be their best, so that if they're a caregiver, we're supporting that.
Mm-hmm.
We are helping people to truly understand that we know that work is not the only aspect of your life. And when you leave work, whatever happens outside of work, you don't come to work and turn those off completely. How can we support that you can be your best self so that you can work here and contribute and innovate to the level that you would?
Yeah, that's it's funny because, being a female CEO, I feel like at least we think inclusively, right? Like my leadership team tends to think inclusively. Um, you know, we make mistakes, of course, but typically speaking, we're probably a little bit more leaning towards the more DEI side than anything. But when I hear you talk about DEI, I think some people have the impression, right, that DEI initiatives are for, you know, being inclusive of different races, let's say. But you're just talking about being inclusive generally. And I think that is something that people maybe don't understand. This idea that DEI is just saying you just have an inclusive mindset. You talk about flexibility. You are more flexible with, hey, this person's neurodiverse. So they need to work till 4 a.m. and sometimes they need to get in a little bit later. And that's where they perform their best work. And they come up with amazing ideas due to that. Or, I can't think of any other interesting uh idea. I don't know if you've read The Culture Map. Do you know this book, The Culture
I
Map?
do. I do.
And the reason why I like The Culture Map, for example, this we are probably 50% US, 50% cultures everywhere, countries everywhere.
Hmm.
And what we found really interesting is even on the manager to engineer level, let's say, different people, it did this, we're a tech consultancy, so you're talking about PR reviews. But people will do PR reviews differently because, some cultures don't want to offend. Some cultures
Hmm.
want very direct
Hmm.
feedback. Some cultures
Hmm.
don't want direct feedback at all.
Hmm.
And being an inclusive leader just means you're understanding and being flexible with those decisions and not saying, hey, everything needs to be exactly the same.
Absolutely. And when we speak about cultural intelligence, that it's easy to think that we are referring to only if you're doing business outside the United States, but cultural
Mm-hmm.
intelligence is also inside the United States.
Absolutely.
Um, what has been a huge bias a lot of the time is extroverts versus introverts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where extroverts are seen as these are real go getters because they're more that word is not coming out right. But I want to say this too. I don't want to boil it down that diversity doesn't mean race and it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean gender, because what we
Mm-hmm.
also know is that there are some very serious gaps in leadership. And I love that you are a woman CEO. I wish that there were more. I love having the opportunity to see leadership in different races and different ethnicities. And in corporate America, there is a lot of opportunity for us to bring more of that to the forefront.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say it, diversity means everybody, right? We
Mm-hmm.
all represent someone and something different. Now, when we speak about the historically marginalized people, then we are really race and gender can be a big part of that conversation. And neurodiversity certainly is also, but we need
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that we're not saying, oh, okay, well, you of a majority race who is a man may be an extrovert and you may be an introvert, and now we got diversity. It's
Mm-hmm.
more than just that. We've got to be inclusive of more than just that. And they'll that is part of it, but that's not the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
we need to really start to look at our leadership teams. We need to start to look at who's in the room. Look
Mm-hmm.
at the room and see who speaks and who doesn't. How is that power distributed? Because a lot of times we think we're being inclusive, and maybe at the top levels we are, but we're not at the front levels. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's a lot to assess when we start to speak about diversity and inclusion, and have we really started to achieve where we want to be in that
Yeah.
vein.
I think it even boils down to how HR handles things.
Oh,
Because
HR is a big part, a big part of it.
I think if you look at HR, I don't know how many years back we need to go. Let's say even probably 10, 15 years ago, right? I remember this one situation. I think, you know, racially diverse backgrounds, right? People coming from different races. There's also sometimes, like if you look at tech, for example, you have a lot of people coming from uh, different backgrounds, right? Like they didn't go to a 4-year college, the families are different, right? Like they haven't had the opportunity to, let's say, generational wealth is the
Mm-hmm.
hot word that I hear all the time, right? Like they haven't had that opportunity yet. They're trying to do that. But I think in that transition, right, when you go from, hey, my family doesn't really have, my family comes from a lower income household, to, hey, I'm entering a place where, let's say you're at Netflix and you're an engineer, you're making $300,000, $700,000. That is a huge difference. But then when you're working through that, I would say I have seen a situation in which, um, they're not educated on, hey, this is the way it should be, because you don't have the parents who
Mm-hmm.
maybe were engineers before giving you the right advice, right? They're giving you different types of advice. But HR, this traditional HR from, like, let's say a big tech org, only deals with something in a very specific way. And they don't include this idea that people come from different backgrounds. And so they're not equipped to handle that. And then they make mistakes that kind of, you know, have people leave, if you will.
Absolutely. I understand exactly what you're saying, Tracy,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
when you ask the question on how would an organization look if you have really achieved some traction in
Mm-hmm.
DEI, part of it is your hiring practices. And what
Mm-hmm.
we know is, an engineer for the most part is going to need a degree in engineering if that's the job they do. Now, a project manager may not need a degree in engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to open up the way that we think about that, because if there is a single parent who is working and has children and went back to school and got a degree, that person probably could manage a project, because they've already had it coming from each side, right? And we have to be open to give people the opportunity. And so part of that is the inclusive hiring practices that may not have existed in HR ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
And the development practices, right? And to be fair, HR may not have always had a seat at the table. The benefit of talent may not have always been felt in all organizations. And so as we evolve, it's very important that HR evolve. And with diversity, equity, and inclusion, a lot of what you do is change management. And so it's working tremendously close with HR to make sure that our hiring practices are inclusive. And we're not listing everything that needs to have a degree, because a lot of people haven't had that opportunity. It doesn't mean that they can't do the job. And we also need to be hiring for a cultural add, not a cultural fit, because a cultural fit is more of what we already have, right? We need people who are going to add value to our organization that we don't currently have. And we've got to educate not just HR, but also our leadership and our managers on how to hire that way, because it's not instinctive. And it also isn't organic, it has to be intentional. And once we've hired this talent, we also need a process so that we're going to continue to develop people, because that's how we retain talent. That's how we bring people in as potentially frontline employees, but we elevate them throughout the organization and we keep them challenged with good opportunities to grow and to make a more than a living wage. People want to succeed, and that may not mean that they want to go straight up the corporate ladder, but they want challenging projects. They want to believe that they're contributing and they want to be valued. And so how are we doing that? And I would say that any DEI leader is going to have to work and collaborate very closely with HR in addition to all other leaders, because it matters how we do that, because your talent is your number one value in an organization, and how you treat that talent shows whether or not you believe that.
I love that. You are kind of reminding me back again when I did work a corporate job right out of college. I joined in with the university group, right? So we had dinner with the CEO. Everybody looked at me and said, "Wow, Tracy, you should be, sitting at the table with the CEO, and I was so excited. And he was talking about a playbook, and I said, "Ooh, do we have access to this playbook?" I had so much energy I wanted to give, and I remember he just looked at me and he said, "Oh, you're just in the honeymoon phase." But that was so discouraging to me. Everybody gets a mentor when you come out of college and you do this, and my mentor was a female leader as well in the organization, but she kind of just threw up her hands and just didn't know what to do with me and stopped mentoring me. So
And
it's
we need
sad.
to teach that. It is
Yeah.
because they lost a great talent, right? And they might have retained you if they had been able to cultivate your interests and keep you engaged.
Yeah.
And the things that our leaders say matter because when you spoke to that CEO, had he talked to you about having a future at that organization, you may have seen a future at that organization.
Yep.
But when
Yep.
he basically diminished what you said to, oh yeah, you're in the honeymoon phase. This is gonna wear off. You know, it killed. Okay, this is not gonna last.
Oh yeah.
Now you've gone on to be successful, which is great for you. However, that organization lost a great talent. And if we don't help our leaders to understand how to cultivate talent, all talent, then we very well are going to continue to lose talent that way.
Hmm. And the things you say, it also is reminiscent of this idea of hiring junior developers, right? So in the development world, there's this whole idea that, oh, we can't hire junior developers because the seniors don't have time, this and that. And, when you talk about these things, it sounds like a lot of effort, a lot of onus being put on the organization or on the organization's people. How does, how do you make DI not feel that way? Or should people feel that way? Like, how do you help leaders overcome that so that they want to invest in DEI?
So I think one of the aspects that corporations have not done well is to help people understand that when you're in leadership, developing talent is part of your responsibility.
Mm,
And if you are looking at your leadership as not only are you responsible to get the job done, but you're also responsible to develop talent. Mentoring and sponsoring becomes part of how you do that. And so it is ingrained into you, hey, I've got these 5 people. What do they want to do in this organization? What training do they need to do it? What are their capabilities right now? And do they know that? Are we having realistic conversations with our employees? You know, all 5 of them say they want to be CEO. Is that really an opportunity, right? What do you need to do to become the CEO? Well, maybe you should be geared towards financials. That's where you really excel. You know, Even though you're in a sales organization right now and you're selling, would you like to spend some time in finance? And that's just a small opportunity. Maybe your specialization is training and you can spend some time in our learning and development group. But if we have true talent in our organization, what do we do to cultivate that? And if it's a senior engineer to a junior engineer, and this is part of what we want you to do, how do we actually communicate that so that you're held accountable to do that? I think that that's the gap. And when we actually have people and we talk about development and engagement of talent as part of your responsibility, DEI doesn't exist on an island.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, so what advice would you give to leaders who are trying to deepen their DEI efforts? Like small changes, everything in my opinion, I'm a very tactical person. So I like to, if there's a punch list that I can punch out, I'm happy. What would you suggest?
I would say look at your organization. And when I say look at it, I don't necessarily just mean look at it visibly. I mean, all organizations have a spreadsheet and you have EEOC compliance. Look at your diversity. What levels do you have in each level? What diversity do you have? Look at your engagement scores. How engaged do your employees feel? And also look at your marketing pieces. And this is a visible opportunity, right? What message are you communicating? Do you actually advertise for the diverse populations that you would like business from? All money is green, but are you asking people for their business and authentic advertising, right? If you are wanting their business, do your customers reflect? Are your customers reflected in your advertising? And when you start to build your business and start to consider your workforce, what is your succession planning looking like? I would say also, where are you recruiting? How do you gain talent? Do you just simply put your job on LinkedIn and whatever comes may? Or do you do any strategic recruiting? How are your talent acquisition teams reaching out to people? Are you measuring who's applying and the diversity at that level versus the diversity that you actually bring into your organization? There are tremendous numbers of ways to see whether or not diversity is actually happening. And if it's not, then there are a lot of low-hanging fruit that you can actually start to implement to help you. And if you're not sure, then by all means, start to ask some consultants. I'm available. If you need help, there are people who can do assessments on your organization to see where you stand. There are other people who are available on fractional work so that they can come in and they can help you if you're not ready to make the investment to build to your team of a chief diversity officer. But there's a variety of ways to do it if you are concerned and you want to make these changes. It is not impossible that you can make strategic changes and start to see some value. You won't turn the entire organization turn the organization around overnight, but you can make changes that will be seen immediately and start to change the culture of your organization. It doesn't take forever to do that.
I love that. I think uh, a lot of DEI efforts or understanding DEI is really just somebody willing to say it. So thank you so much for coming on and saying it. A lot of these things, I'm like, of course. But I think a lot of people, again, don't. It takes somebody to create a framework, provide a framework for somebody. I think also when you look at uh, recruiting from diverse places, right? Some of these things initially, and I think this is what we were saying about a few other DEI things, it seems difficult, or it seems like this is harder because I haven't done it before, or this is harder because I'm not getting the result that I want. But what it really takes is the time and effort to find the breakthrough moment to say, oh, wow, now it's really easy. Which it does become easy, right? Like I can imagine, for example, people trying to create more, uh, recruit from diverse places. And so when you initially start recruiting from diverse places, you're coming at the table, you're feeling a little uncomfortable, you don't know what's going on. So it's kind of roles reversed, if you will. And it's difficult. But if you keep trying, you keep talking to those people, you keep trying to figure out where and how to recruit in those situations, those areas, then all of a sudden there will be a breakthrough. And all of a sudden you'll get a good pipeline. And then you'll have figured out, what you need to figure out to make your business more successful. So I love that.
Absolutely, Tracy. And if I were going to summarize what you say, I'd say it's got to be intentional. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
just happen. You have to intentionally set your DEI efforts and make that part of how you do business.
Yes. Yes. I love that. Well, I wanted to give a quick shout out and thank you to our sponsor, This Dot Labs, which is my company. We are trusted experts in modern web development and consulting. My team is amazing. I love them all. And we really love helping scale development teams. So bringing innovative ideas to life can sometimes be challenging. That's where this dot comes in. We specialize in amplifying your technical capabilities, whether it's just expanding your dev team or streamlining your projects. So check us out, this.co. That's THISDOT.co. And big thank you again to my team for always sponsoring this episode and being committed to the developer community and the leadership community. So thank you so much. And thank you so much, Nina. So I know you said that you are available for fractional work. Where can we find you? How do we learn a little bit more about what you do?
I would love for people to join my website, and you can find that at inclusive-ideas.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn at Nina Bryson Fleming. And I am looking forward to hearing from you.
Okay, well, amazing. Thank you, everyone, again for listening, and we will see you all next time.